The theme is Meander, and that has a lot of different ideas connected with it. That could be that how a piece works through the soap factory space, and that little bits of it will continue throughout it, connect with other pieces. Some of it will be, you know, what are people's ideas about the idea of Meander? Like, what does that mean to them? Some of it's very literal, so some people are approaching it with maps. Some people are thinking about river systems. There's a lot of systems related with meandering, so some people are focused more on that, and other things are very conceptual, like where do your thoughts go in a specific space of time. So it'll be interesting to me to see everybody's point of view and how it all goes together in the end.
What I've been doing primarily for this show is all photography so far. So I'm kind of approaching it like a travel log or a travel journal. I've actually been reading a lot about early tourism in the United States and how that shaped national identity and things like nature attractions and things like that in the United States, and how the sort of wealthy, fashionable tourists would keep these journals and these travel logs, and they'd draw things as they traveled and write things down and write really bad poetry and stuff like that. And then these, as it became sort of more democratic and more people were able to travel, then middle class, working class people started to travel, and they did basically the same stuff. And so I'm sort of working on a series of just photographs and image making I'm dealing with every time I go out onto the interstate system specifically. Just taking pictures out the window. I'm sort of sketching on top of the photos. I'm doing some stuff, kind of linking it back to the history, but also the current landscape, sort of what resulted from those early travels, the way that the nation was sort of set up as a system of roads, a system of regions and stuff like that.
I worked with the show here last spring, and while I was working in the space, I just kept getting all these ideas. And I do a lot of collaborative work, but I wasn't sure how Ben would feel, the director, how he would feel about having a lot of collaboration in the space. So I just asked him, and I was wondering how he'd feel about a few of us getting together and kind of making a rather spontaneous work, and that we don't really know where everything is going to go. We don't even know all the parts yet. But, so I gathered, there's 18 of us, I'm included in that number. But most of are people that I've worked with before or wanted to collaborate with. And a lot of the 18 have actually worked together before. So some of us have worked with up to, I think 6 of us have worked together on projects collectively, and then others just one person worked with that person, the other person, and somehow linked something like that. And we're all gathering back together here for a week and a half. Some of the works are pre-thought. We have some video, and when the video is introduced, then people will probably be reacting to that.
I've been filming water, collaborating with Bethany actually. We've been filming water moving and ice melting, things like that. But I've also we've been tracking these crows that come into the neighborhood, and they kind of come in and take over at dusk. And then so it's kind of a very sensory experience, and there's a lot of visuals because they're flying everywhere, and there's all these sounds that are being heard, and so that whole kind of experience was very appealing to me. So we've been tracking those, and I've been mapping them actually, so that may come into it as well. But in the video, I really kind of concentrate on the frame, and instead of using video in a very kind of traditional format where you make cuts and edits, I just kind of choose a spot and I just leave the camera there and I let the crows kind of enter and exit the frame. So the frame is very important to me in what I've been doing. So and letting the natural movement of the crows kind of create the interesting parts of the piece. Well, originally when I've worked in video before, I've stuck to the projected image, but I think for this exhibition it's going to be more in terms of shown on a monitor. But I don't really want it to be necessarily like the traditional, museum gallery where video's playing on a monitor where it's, put on a pedestal or whatever. I'm more interested in creating some sort of installation with it. So the monitors may be on the floor, they may be submerged into the floor if we can figure out how to do that, so kind of experimental ways of displaying, video on a monitor rather than just putting it on a pedestal and letting it play or whatever. So that's what I'm thinking now. As far as like where in the gallery it's going to happen at, I don't know yet. We're kind of going to wait till the install and see what everybody else is doing, and then see where it fits best within the whole spectrum of the show.
There are things like animations that will be happening right here during install. People will just keep changing who's up basically at bat, who's going to be working on it.
A lot of my shows in the past have dealt with museum objects and how museums gather objects and things, and how the museum works as almost a cannibal. It consumes and consumes and consumes culture and people. And so I think with this show, how I'm going to address these issues that I'm working with in this show is that this show seems to have a lot of exchange, a lot of reciprocity, a lot of dialectics between artists, are at play, how someone will take a motif and use it. So I think that how I'm going to use it is taking, the idea of the cannibal metaphorically and applying it to kind of consuming these other artists' objects and creations. I come from Ojibwe and Scandinavian past, so I'm interested in ideas. I'm interested in identity and how that gets kind of superimposed on objects, and how in Ojibwe past we have the idea of the fur trade and exchange and the Columbus exchange, and what does that mean for people, their different identities, and what is actually being exchanged. And a lot of times it's of the memory, it's culture, it's identity, and then these things are exchanged in our objects. So I'm interested in that, and trying to maybe in this show see how that meaning can kind of work collaboratively. And so in Ojibwe mythology, there's this creature called the Wendigo, and he's defined as the winter cannibal monster, and he often misidentifies those that he consumes. And so I like that the idea of misidentification is what makes it okay for him to consume something he can normally identify with. And so I like that concept. I think that's how I'll address this show, is kind of being that ever-eating creature.
I'm familiar with everybody's work to a point where I know that they're capable of linking things, and I'm also up for some surprises. So I've let the artist try new things as well as do some of the things that I know that that I already know of them. So it's still a big. It's planned to a point. People are going to be here. We'll have supplies ready, and some people will actually bring materials with them, and the rest is just going to happen within a week and a half, and we'll see what happens without little sleep. Yeah.